So what we're going to be taking a look in section 9-3 is continuing to use our cash payments journal. But what we're going to look at is what's going to happen when we get to the end of a page and that we need to total improve and then bring some numbers forward. It's going to be the same concept, okay? Anytime we get to a new month, we have to start a new page. That's always going to be true for any journal that we're using. Okay, what's going to happen is cash payment is going to be one of your most heavily used journals because businesses have to pay money out a lot. You pay out more money than you're going to be receiving. And the reason on that is because think about your customers that are going to be coming in and paying cash. Do you record each one of those separately? No, you're probably either going to do it at the end of the day or maybe at the end of the week, depending on the size of your business for recording your sales, and that would be one big number. But any time that you have any money going out of the business as a cash payment, it's going to need to be recorded separately on your cash payments journal, which is why it needs to be used the most. The other thing that's going to happen is we have to go through and do petty cash. And petty cash was a transaction that you had some questions and trouble with going through and doing Enrico Sanchez, okay? Because what happens is, in the life of a business, the business is going to establish the petty cash fund once, okay? And you had to do that in Enrico Sanchez, and then you had to replenish it. Because every month, the business goes through and replenishes the petty cash fund. Now, what happens typically is there are mistakes in life. Human mistakes, computer mistakes, what may happen. For example, I'm going to go run to Office Depot and I'm going to buy a box of paper for my business. Boss sends me to go do that task. He gives me some money from petty cash. I go to Office Depot. I have $40 and it's $37.50 is the amount of the transaction. He gives me change back. I put the change in my pocket with my receipt. I go back to the office, drop off the paper, grab the money out of my pocket, put it back in the petty cash, but the quarters stayed in my pocket. Or maybe I grabbed extra quarter that was in my pocket and I didn't realize it. Do you see that happening? Could the person at Office Max give me the wrong change? All of those things are legitimate things that, guess what, we have to figure out how are we going to account for it. Because in the books, we have to record the fact that we just bought Supplies Office at $37.50. That's a cold, hard truth because I have a receipt. That is the value of my new asset. But what's going to happen is you could have cash that would be over or you could have cash that would be short. Okay? The way that we could have cash short also could be maybe that we weren't given the right change or that type of thing. So we just have to go through and determine, do we have extra cash or are we short cash? Now, cash short and over is a new account for us, and it's going to be listed under the expense accounts, but it's not going to say the word expense at it. And the only time that we're going to use it is going to be when we replenish petty cash. So what we have included with this assignment is something called a petty cash slip. And the petty cash slip is used for us to go through and prove and figure out how much money that we have spent in petty cash compared to what we've bought. Now, cash short and over is under the expense account section, but you're not always going to debit and you're not always going to credit. Like I say, anytime you affect rent expense, it's going to be a debit. That's a standard. Cash short and over, you're going to debit or credit depending on if you're short or if you're over. And remember, over is like, hey, you got extra money. It's like revenue. Revenue has a credit normal balance. If you're short, that means, hey, I don't have enough money to cover it. That's like an expense, and you would have to debit it. So cash short and over, you have to determine if you're debiting or crediting it depending on which one that it is, either short or over. And what's going to happen is when we take a look at our petty cash report, it's going to go through and tell us that who's the custodian of the petty cash accounts. That's one person that's in charge of it. In this business, it's Kevin. And the value of petty cash is $200. And then on March 31st, he goes through and he looks at the receipts. And he said he has Supplies Office for $45.23, Supplies Store $66.18, miscellaneous at $49.25. Okay, but then the new piece of information is a cash count shows $40.59 in there. So ideally, our value of items that we bought should match equaling to the amount of cash that we have left over. But that's not going to happen. We're going to have some mistakes. So then we have to go through and use that petty cash slip to prepare it. Ready to try her? Yay! Glad Tanner's excited. Everyone else, I think, is sleeping. So what we have to do on the bottom of page 5 is we need to go through and set up our journal to be ready to move to the next page. So we have to put the date of the 27th. Carried forward goes on the bottom of the page, and we put a check mark in the post reference. Okay, so that's what I did right there. Then on the top of page 6, I'm going to put in my month, which is March. The date is the 27th. I'm going to put brought forward, check mark in the post reference, and then I carry my numbers down. So all I did is I looked at the bottom of page 5, Cash Payments Journal, took those numbers and put them at the top of page 6. Now I have to fill out my petty cash report. So that is located right below page 6. So what I have to do is I have to put the date in, and the date is going to be March 31st. Custodian is Kevin Tomlinson. So we're going to go through and put numbers in these columns. So it's going to say reconciliation. So that basically is how much does our fund start with, which is going to be $200. Then it's asking us how much do we spend in supplies office, and that was $45.23. Supplies store was $66.18, and miscellaneous was $49.25. Now I have to do some math. Okay, so I'm going to add up my $45.23, $66.18, and $49.25, and the total is going to go right here. I got 160.66. All right, someone else did. And do you see how there's an arrow going over? I'm going to just put that number there twice. Now, this is where students struggle a little bit because guess what? You don't read. Do you see right here? What does it say that I'm circling? Less. So guess what I need to do? That. Subtract that will give me this number. It mathematically here, using my words, tells me what it's supposed to do. So I have to take 200 and I need to subtract 160.66. That is going to give me the recorded amount on hand. So according to my receipts, that's how much money I should have. Does it match? Okay. Because the next thing it says here is what is our actual amount on hand? $40.59. Okay. Do we have more cash on hand or less cash on hand? More. Would you agree? More is called a short or an over. If I have more cash, is that short or is it over? You need to know this or you're not going to be able to complete this. It is over. Now, please note, over right here is in what? So, we have an over here. Would you agree? Of how much? Okay, that needs to go here in parentheses. Got it? Also, if you look at it mathematically, I need to subtract $40.59 from $39.34, so it should give me a negative number, right? In parentheses tends to mean in math, when we're adding or subtracting, that it is going to be a negative number. Okay? So what I need to do you see this little arrow? I need to put this number over here, in parentheses still. Now, in the past, I would write out a check for $160.66. What would happen if I write out a check for $160.66 right now? Be over by $1.25. So what I need to do is I don't need to write a check for $160.66. I'm going to go through and subtract that $125 from it, and cash is going to be that amount. I still need to debit supplies office $45.23, supplies store $66.18, miscellaneous $49.25. But the amount of cash that I have to do is what I need to calculate. So what is the amount of my check? The amount to replenish, I should say. Does that make a little bit of sense? This is a harder one. Now, what I need to do is I fill out my petty cash report, and then I'm going to go through and actually journalize the transaction. So now I need to take this information and journalize it. So I'm going to put the date of the 31st. I do not use the account title petty cash. I am going to do supplies, office. My check number is 536. Supplies office is going to be 4523. Supplies store 6618. Miscellaneous expense 4925. Cash short and over. Now this is where you got to figure it out. Is it a debit or is it a credit? Dylan's like, I have no idea, Grassel. Tell me. Remember, right here, we determine, is it a short or is it an over? Because it's in parentheses, we know it's an over. Is an over like an expense or is it like money, a revenue? Revenue. So what is the normal balance of revenue accounts? Credit. So I'm going to credit cash short and over 125. The account title is always cash short and over. You're not going to write one time cash short and the other time write cash over. The account title is always cash short and over, but how we affect it is going to be based on there. Now, the other thing I did not do is I did not put my cash amount. The cash amount goes on line 2 of my journal, and that's going to go for $159.41. So I waited till the end to plug that in just to point that out to you. So I'm using these numbers right here, my cash short and over, and my replenish amount. The last thing I have to do is put the date in on the 31st. It's the last day of the month, so I need to do my totals. I keep typing C's instead of V's. Then you have to do your math. You need to prove your journal down below your petty cash report. Just put your numbers in the right spots and then go through and add them up. Oh, I put a check mark in the total column and I was not supposed to, just as a heads up.